What's up, everybody? It's AyyScare, and in this video, we are going to be doing our season recap. Now, the season is going to be simulated in the background, and it was fully simulated by the game. This simulation takes about 2 hours, so what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 hours to actually introduce the 16 teams that we're going to be following, so the top 16 teams of this simulation, and we'll have the simulation running in fast speed in the background, so you can still see it kind of going on between things, but there's not much to really take away from watching this, as you can probably tell. So let's go ahead and get started. On the left conference, the top seed is Team Ohio. Ohio finished the season at 51 wins to 29 losses. And they are kind of spearheaded and led by their main starting pitcher, Laurel O'Connor. She is probably one of the best starting pitchers in the league. The team itself is very balanced. You'll see that their A+, A, and A- player all ended up in the field and batting. So that gives them a really good mix of one really good starting pitcher with those three really good fielders and batters. One thing to note, Laurel O'Connor, because she is a starting pitcher, she can only start once every 4 games. So kind of that first game for Ohio is going to be very big because that's going to be their main pitcher. Their other 3 starting pitchers are all in that C range. So Laurel O'Connor really will be interesting to see if she's able to kind of crank out that first win overall. But the main thing to keep in mind is that if they go down in the series like 3-0, there's a good chance Laurel O'Connor will not pitch again. So it will be very important to see where she falls in the games that she starts. Here you'll be able to see the stats of everybody on each team. What you will see here, just to remind you from the introduction video, each team will have one S player, 1A+, 1A, 1A-, 1B+, 2 Bs, 2 B-, 3 C+, 3 Cs, and 6 C-. You'll also see batting, throwing, and then all of the actual stats that, again, had to be manually done. So this is definitely a little bit of a project. With this team, you'll also be able to see all of their stats as shown here. And as a quick reminder, all of these stats have been manually transferred into a spreadsheet. So if you do have interest in looking through the stats and making charts or something, just let me know. But main thing to take away from Ohio is the fact that Gwendolyn Flounder had third most hits in the league at 108 and also the second best batting average at .331. And the other thing about Gwendolyn Fowler is that she is a B+. So she is not even the top 4 on the team, but she did very well in the regular season, so she'll be somebody to track. The Team Ohio here, of the 16 teams that have made the playoffs, they did have the most hits as a team, and they had the 3rd most points scored. So just 2 things to keep in mind as we go. Their overall pitching is not all that great. However, they do have Laurel O'Connor, who went 12 wins to 4 losses with a 2.41 ERA. So again, the games that she starts are going to be very important to Ohio's success. Let's now look at the right conference. First team to make it through and top seed is Virginia. The Virginia team finished 50 wins to 30 losses, and they are going to be led by their first baseman, Alicia Blevins. Now, Virginia does have an overall balanced team. However, they do have strengths in their starting rotation, and they do not have a lot of power. Now, part of this is that Alicia Blevins does actually have a very high power rating, and she also, if we switch to their actual stats here, you'll see she actually led the league in home runs with 29. She also led the league in RBIs with 74. So a very important player who's really going to probably define how Virginia makes it through this tournament. Virginia as a team was second in points scored, second in batting average, third in hits, and in terms of a defensive pitching side of things, they also allowed the third least points for a team in this tournament. So they're overall a very good team that we're going to have to keep an eye on, because I think that they could definitely make a deep run into this tournament. Next up, we're going to switch back to the left side of the conference, and the second seed is Michigan. Michigan finished with 48 wins to 32 losses. They are led by their right fielder, Baylor Grayweather. The Michigan team overall is considered balanced. However, they do have the highest bars in their defense. If we look, they do have a great starting pitcher in Chern Ferguson, and then they also have a great relief pitcher in Santiago Precious. In terms of their team stats here, we're looking at, again, just overall a very balanced team. And if we look at their actual stats on the season, Baylor Grayweather was second highest, or tied for second highest, with 26 home runs, and tied for third with 69 RBIs. Chern Ferguson, you'll also see, finished with 11 wins to 4 losses, and also a 2.65 ERA. So even though Chern Ferguson is rated an A- as a starting pitcher, he was right up there with the stats that Laurel O'Connor put up for Ohio. Michigan, in and of itself, they had the best ERA for the average pitcher, and they allowed the second least points as a team. So for Michigan, we'll be looking at kind of those low-scoring games. If a game makes it to 5+ runs, Michigan will probably be in trouble, but we'll see how that all plays out. Next up, we have the second seed on the right conference, and that is going to be Kentucky. Kentucky finished with 45 wins to 35 losses. They are considered the defensive experts. If you look at their stats there on the left, they really have really, really low scores in both their rotation and their pen. If you look at their pitchers, which is the bottom line there, the first 4 are the starting, and then the next 4 are the relief. They don't have a single pitcher that is above a B rating. So what we're looking at with Kentucky is going to be a high-scoring team that is really going to focus on their scoring and their fielding. We'll take a quick look here at their kind of stats that were set up. If you want to pause and look at this in more detail, you're definitely welcome to look through. And then in terms of their stats, Phil Roth, who's their left fielder, did tie for third with 69 RBIs. Now, the thing to keep in mind with Kentucky here, and I'm going to touch on this as a team stat in a second, is their home runs. While nobody on the team finished in the top 3 for home runs in the league, almost every single one of their starters finished with double-digit home runs. This is going to be something that we're going to have to watch with Kentucky. Of the 16 teams that made the tournament, they are second with 108 team home runs. We're now going to look at number 3 on the left conference, and the team that made that slot is Louisiana. Louisiana finished with 46 wins to 34 losses. And they are led by their main starting pitcher, Frank Ali. If we look at their stat bars, they put a lot into their starting rotation. Between Frank Ali and Rock Mahoney, we're looking at 2 really good pitchers. And again, those first 2 games of each series are going to be extremely important. The good thing about that for Louisiana, though, is in a best of 7, that means that they're going to have really good pitchers for games 1, 2, 5, and 6, which should put them in a very good position. They also have Shrewd Nixon as a very good relief pitcher who will be able to pitch on probably most of their games. Here, we'll take a quick look at their stat lineup. And then in terms of a team overall, one thing to keep in mind here is Francis Bradley did have the third most stolen bases in the league. So he'll be somebody that we'll have to watch and kind of see how he pans out. The other thing to note here is that they have a specific closing pitcher in Orlando Williamson. However, of the 3 relief pitchers they have, all 3 of them came out with extremely good win-to-loss ratios. So this is a team that going into the 5th, 6th inning might be down a run or 2, but is going to stand a chance to really step it up. Louisiana as a team had the least home runs of any team that we're following in this series. However, they did have the best batting average, 3rd best stolen bases, and then both their pitching ERA and WHIP scores were within the top 3. Let's now take a look at the 3rd team on the right side conference, and that is going to be Oregon. Oregon finished with 42 wins to 34 losses. They're considered a balanced team. They are spearheaded by their top relief pitcher in Pat Park. Take a quick look again just at their overall stats for each player. And then the actual stat line, big thing to note here, that Pat Park relief pitcher, he finished 7 wins, 3 losses. However, had a very good ERA and the top, or tied for top WHIP rating of any player in this tournament. So going into these games, Pat Park will be a very key pitcher that we'll see how he needs to perform. Oregon as a team did not actually finish in the top half of any of the main stat categories. And they actually finished 15th of 16th team in batting average and the worst team in this tournament in hits. It will be very interesting to see how Oregon progresses through this tournament. Now back to the left conference. The final division winner goes to Arizona. Arizona finished their season with 43 wins to 37 losses. If we take a look here at their team as a whole, the one thing that will probably stand out is the fact that their power rating bar doesn't even show up. So this is a team that's going to focus a lot on contact hitting and speed and defense in order to really put points on the board. Their top player is Russ Plaintiff as their main starting pitcher. And then they have a lot of really good players across the board. They're also one of the few teams in this tournament that has an exceptionally good closing pitcher. You'll see down there in the bottom right, Sienna McBiddles, I think is how you say that, is their A- player. So again, if they get into that 8th, 9th inning with a lead or a tie, they're looking to be in a very good situation. Arizona as a whole, 2 things I do want to call out here because I think that the traits may work kind of against them a little bit here. Their 2 of their negative traits went to 2 of their top 3 players. You'll see at the top here, Gene Holcorn, their first baseman, really good ratings overall, but has that RBI dud trait, which does mean that when there's somebody on second or third base and they're up to bat, a lot of their stats are going to drop a little bit. Also, Rebecca McFreddy there, decent speed, not great speed, but a good enough speed that they could probably do some stealing. They did get the bad jumps trait, which means that even though their speed is good and they'll be able to run the bases okay, they're going to have some problems with stealing. So just 2 limiting factors for a team that overall looks pretty good. The other thing to note is a lot of teams do not have a good third and fourth starting pitcher. While this team does have a C and a C- for their third and fourth starting pitchers, they did both get positive traits, which I think will really play in to how that plays out for them. The team as a whole, Gene Holcorn finished with tied for second most home runs. And then Russ Plaintiff, again, one of the best pitchers in the league, exceptionally good, third in whip score, and actually led the league in strikeouts. As a team overall, Arizona had the third best batting average, and they were 15th in average ERA, so bad when it comes to their pitching overall. And they also let up the 15th in points allowed. So of the 16 teams, they let up the second most points of any team in this tournament. We're now going to look at the final division winner on the right-hand conference, and that goes to Connecticut. Connecticut finished with 42 wins to 38 losses. Connecticut is an exceptionally good pitching team, so it's something that we're going to have to look out for. With Connecticut, we are going to probably be looking at low-scoring games, and they're going to have to keep these games low in order to remain in them. If you look here, they are rated as an extreme rotation aces team. All three of their A ratings went to their first three pitchers, and their B- went to their fourth starting pitcher. That being said, their relief pitching is not as good. So, if those starting pitchers can remain in for 5, 6, 7 innings, that's going to be really big for Connecticut. The good thing for Connecticut is that they did get their S player in Miriam Briefs as their center fielder, and she will bring a lot to their batting. If we take a look here, not only does she have very good ratings across the board, she also ended up with a positive trait. So a very important player for them. If we take a look here at their stats, you'll see they have a couple of stats down there for their starting pitchers. Killer Elliston, one of the top-rated ERA, and then Reagan Morin, with the second most strikeouts in the league. In terms of a team overall, Connecticut was in the bottom 3 in all of these teams in points scored, home runs, batting average, hits, and fielding errors. So all of those are exceptionally bad for going into this tournament. The only thing that they finished as a top 3 team on in terms of the main stats that I was looking at is their average starting pitcher almost made it an average of 6 innings. So again, that's very important for that team. That starting pitcher really needs to stay in there for them. Now let's hop into the other teams that made it. Again, these were the top teams on each conference that did not win their division. On the left side, the 5th seed going against Arizona is going to be Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania finished their season with 44 wins to 36 losses. They are spearheaded by their closing pitcher, Gustav Finley. So it's going to be extremely important for Pennsylvania to go into that 8th, 9th inning with a lead, and then they should be able to close it out. Overall, their starting pitching is decent, and their overall fielding and batting is pretty good. They actually got a very good mix of where their ratings landed, so they did end up with a balanced rating. Here's a quick look at their overall kind of stats and traits. Something important, or at least I think it's important for this team, 2 of their negative traits went to their 2 worst batters and fielders there, in Fisher Klopp and Harry Bean. So that it means that those 2 players probably are not going to be able to sub in on a regular basis and things like that. But it means that those traits will generally not negatively affect the team on a game-to-game basis, which I do think is important for them. In terms of their stats, none of their players really ended with a top 3 in any of the main categories, but they did have an overall very solid team. Pennsylvania as a team finished with the second best fielding, or the second least errors. They got the most starts out of their pitchers, and they were third in the average pitching whip stat. They did fall in the bottom 3 of batting average and stolen bases. However, for a team overall, that is a very, very solid team and very solid rating. On the right side, slot 5 went to Oklahoma. So that first matchup will be Connecticut versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma finished with 44 wins to 36 losses. They are spearheaded by their right fielder, Harper Maloney. They're considered a balanced team. They actually have very good ratings across both their starting pitchers and relief pitchers. So again, a very kind of pitch-heavy team. But they do have a number of fielders and batters that will put them into decent positions. If we take a look here, you'll see Harper Maloney, very good and very clear best batter and fielder for them. He also ended up with that positive high pitch trait, which should really make him one of the studs that we need to look at in this series. If we take a look at their stats overall, the only player that made a top 3 was Blossom Real, who finished with the best ERA of a pitcher in this series, which actually is interesting because Blossom Real is only considered an A rating, so not an A plus or an S, but a very important pitcher for them. 7 wins to 2 losses, and again, best ERA in the series. For Oklahoma, they did finish with the second most errors for a team when it comes to fielding. And the big thing for Oklahoma is they allowed the least points of any team in this series. We're now going to look at the 6th seed on the left bracket, and that will go to Iowa. So that first matchup is going to be Louisiana versus Iowa. Iowa finished with 42 wins to 38 losses. And they are led by their center fielder in David Macho Man. The interesting thing about Iowa, if we just take a quick look kind of at this page as a whole, S, A+, and A are all in the field and batting. That being said, their relief pitching and overall pitching is not very good. So Iowa is going to be one of those teams that really is going to look for those 5+ points per game in order to take these wins. If we take a quick look here at their player stats, and then if we take a look at their individual stats, you'll see Iowa did not make it into the top of any player individually. However, they are the only other team, if you look at that home run column, that really everybody on their starting lineup is a potential home run threat, which is going to be something that we'll have to look out for. As a team, Iowa, of the 16 teams, had the most points scored, had the most home runs, had the least fielding errors, and they had the second most stolen bases. Those are all extremely good, but it means that they're extremely dependent on their offense. This team actually scored last in average pitching ERA, average pitching whip, average pitchers starting innings pitched. So basically their starting pitchers do not last long. They only last normally about 4 innings. And they also let up the most points allowed of these 16 teams. So again, it's a team that we're going to have to look for and see how they progress. On the right side, in the 6th seed, goes to Washington. So that series is going to start Oregon versus Washington. Washington finished with 41 wins to 39 losses. They are considered a very balanced team, and they are led by their right fielder in Benjamin Marzo. They do have a decent overall pitching situation. Normally when you look at that 4th slot, you see most teams end it with a C minus there. So the fourth slot being a C minus is not a terrible thing, because they're probably going to be pretty equal. However, when those games come up, we're probably going to be looking at some pretty high scoring matches. In terms of an overall team here, you'll see Benjamin Marzo is 99 in 3 out of the 5 categories. And then Fowler Sawyer is very good across the board and has that power versus left-handed pitcher, but also that whiffer trait. In terms of a team, they did have the first and second most stolen bases per player in Benjamin Marzo and then in Jar Floggins. And then they also had a very good average batting average with Vincent Kaboots. And then also Cal Midfield, who's their first starting pitcher, also ended the series with the third most strikeouts. So overall, a very interesting team that has a lot of individual contributors. Washington as a team had the most stolen bases, second most hits, best average whip for the pitching staff, and they didn't end in the bottom 3 in any of the major stat categories in terms of overall team. Rank 7 on the left-hand bracket goes to Georgia. So it'll be Michigan versus Georgia for the first series. Georgia finished at 500 at 40-40. They have a lot of talent spread across their team. They are potentially one of the most balanced teams that we actually have in this tournament. And I think that we'll see a lot of interesting games from them. In terms of an overall team, they did end up with 2 of their top 5 batters with the RBI dud trait, which could play in to their matches very significantly. And again, since all these teams are going to be in best of 7 situations, losing a single game because of an RBI dud stat or something like that could really be devastating and get them eliminated early, but we'll see how it progresses for them. In terms of their individual contributors, Madeline Griffin had second most hits in the league at 109. As a team, Georgia did not finish in the top half of any stat category. They actually finished second lowest in home runs with a team total of 60, and they also had the most fielding errors of any team that made this tournament. So they're going to be a team that will be interesting to watch. They're not really powerful anywhere, so we're going to probably be looking at them kind of hoping for those average games where they're able to pull it out by a run or 2. Seed 7 on the right-hand conference goes to Wisconsin. So we'll be looking at Kentucky versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin ended 41 wins to 39 losses. They are once again considered a balanced team. However, they really do not have great starting pitchers. Their starting pitcher situation is actually going to be their biggest problem. So they do have Ariel Lang, who's a B-. However, because she is their starting pitcher 1, that means that she will be pitching normally against like an S or an A rated pitcher. And then I mentioned a couple of teams ago, C- in that 4th starting pitcher slot is not a big concern. However, 2, 3, and 4 for Wisconsin are all C-. So we're going to be looking at probably some high scoring games coming from this Wisconsin team. The one thing to note though, their top player is Jaden Atkins, who's their closer. So what we're probably going to be seeing with Wisconsin is high-scoring games. If they can get to that 8th, 9th inning within a run or 2, they stand a very serious shot. Take a quick look here at their team stats. And as you can see here, they, as a team of individual contributors, nobody made it top 3 in any major category. As a team, they did finish the 3rd most home runs, and they finished with the worst number of stolen bases. They did still get 41, But in an 80-game season, that means that they're only averaging about a stolen base every other game. So definitely not a high rating there. We're now going to look at seed 8 on the left. And let me just quickly preface this by, this is one that I need to go and find a picture of that I need to plug in to this. Number 8 goes to Texas. Now, Texas had I can only describe as basically a Cinderella story to make it into this tournament. They finished 39-41, so they're actually, I think, the only team in the tournament that made it with a below 500 overall record. However, and this is where I'll find the screenshot and plug it in, they had one of the worst starts to a series or starts to the season that I've ever seen in my limited time with this game. The screenshot will prove it, but I think that they started this season around like 8 wins to 22 losses. So realistically, I was expecting them to finish as one of the worst teams in the series. But in the second half of the season, they clawed their way back and made it into this playoffs by the skin of their teeth. They are led by their third baseman, Aaron Sexton, and they really do have an interesting lineup where I think their starting pitchers are not great, but they're going to keep them very active and competitive. A lot of their top talent is in the field. Their S, A plus, A minus, B plus are all fielders and batters. So we're going to be probably looking at some high scoring games from this Texas team. In terms of the team overall, Andre McFarland had the most hits of any player in the league and also led the league in batting average at 0.344. In terms of a team overall, Texas had the third least fielding errors, so they're a very good fielding team. And they also got a lot of mileage from their starting pitchers. Their starting pitchers averaged almost 6 innings pitched, which puts them at second in terms of how much mileage they got from their starting pitchers. They did let up the third most points allowed. So a team, again, that if they want to win these matches, they're going to have to keep those games relatively low. Their points scored ranked 6th. So they're not the best points scoring team. So they need to keep these games low in order to remain competitive. Final team that we're going to talk about is on the right conference. Seed 8 was won by Minnesota. So the Minnesota going against Virginia. Minnesota finished at 41 wins and 39 losses. And they are spearheaded by their starting pitcher, Fabian Burdock. This team has a lot of pitching talent. So once again, this is going to be a team that we're going to be watching for some low-scoring matches in order for them to make it through this tournament. One of the bad things for Minnesota is that, first of all, you'll see here, none of their A ratings went to their fielding and batting players, and 2 of their negative traits landed on their third and fourth best player there at the top. So this is a team that those negative traits I think could really play a key role in how this plays out for them. In terms of individual contributors, nobody on their team was like a top of their stat line. As a team itself, they actually did not finish top 3 in any major category. Of the 16 teams, they scored the least amount of points. They put up they scored 14th worst, was a 14th out of 16 in hits. They also finished 15th out of 16 with stolen bases. And they're also not getting great mileage from their starting pitchers. Their starting pitchers only averaged to about between the 4th and 5th inning. So Minnesota will be a team that, again, we'll have to watch. They're not a high-scoring offense, so that pitching staff is going to have to come in huge for them. With that, we're going to sit here as the season finishes playing out. I look forward to casting the first official game. The first official game is going to start with the top left. So we're going to start with the left conference and work our way down, and then we're going to do the right conference and work our way down. So our first games will be Ohio versus Texas. I'm looking super forward to starting this series. Again, if you want to look at the stats more in depth, send me a message or something, and I can send you over all of the stats from the regular season. If you want to co-cast a game with me, please let me know. And we are going to kick this thing off very shortly. If you stuck around to the end, thank you so much. And I'll see you guys for the first official game.